Welcome to Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome to the world's largest conference for podcasters by podcasters. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2015.
Are you prepared for the movement? The podcast movement. My friends, look around. I mean, we have created a movement. You've created a movement. We've created a movement. And it's just so exciting to be in the same room with so many people who are looking to share their message, their mission, their brands with the world. There's actually a little story I'm going to share right now that I wasn't going to share until literally 2 seconds ago, so a little bit of a risk. But when my man was introducing me here and he was talking about 2013 New Media Expo, I was flashed back to an email about a week before from Jared and Chris Matthews, and they said, John, we would love to throw a Fire Nation meetup at New Media Expo before your talk. Now, I'd only been asked to speak 2 weeks prior to that, and only because there was a last-minute dropout. I'd only been podcasting for about 2 months at that time. So I said, okay, we'll do it. Let's do this Fire Nation meetup. I mean, if you guys want to take control, I'd love to make it happen. So sure enough, I show up at an In-N-Out in Las Vegas. There's Jared, there's Chris, and there are 2 people with them. One of them's in the room. Where's Shay? Shay's in the house. She's the original Fire Nation Elite meetup over there. Love it. So that's how everything started with EntrepreneurOnFire and with meetups and with gatherings. And of course, it's culminated to just a couple of days ago. We had the Paradise meetup with over 200 Paradisers at Whiskey and Rye. So that's the type of movement that we've been able to create. And that's the kind of movement that I'm really inspired for everybody in this room to create, because it is possible. I've done it, you can do it, and I'm gonna be giving you the tools today to make it happen. Because the reality is this: you've come here for many reasons. It could be Pat Flynn, could be Roman Mars, Mark Maron, could be the 101-degree weather, if you're inclined. But the fact of the matter is, when you look back on Podcast Movement, you're gonna remember the people that are sitting to your right and to your left. You're gonna remember the people who you were just chatting with in the hallway. You're gonna remember the people that you were having a drink with at Stockyard last night. It's the attendees and the relationships that you are making. This is gonna be what you remember from Podcast Movement, and these are gonna be the relationships and the connections that are gonna move you forward and inspire you on your podcasting journey. So I'm gonna do something a little different today than you've been hearing so far, because I've been attending the sessions and they have been absolutely amazing. Top quality speakers, top quality content. You have been getting jammed with great tips, great tools, great tactics, and I've taken a lot away as well. So I wanna do something just a little bit different. I'm gonna be giving you the 10 pillars of podcasting success as I see it. Because I've been on the journey now for almost 3 years. Over 1,000 episodes, over 19 million downloads to date. And I think of that journey, and it had a lot of ups, but it also had a lot of downs. And your journey, no matter where you are, is going to have a lot of downs as well. So when you do get into that funk, when you do hit that wall, that barrier, when that imposter syndrome, that voice starts speaking to you, I want you to go to these 10 pillars of podcasting success. Read through them, because I guarantee you that one, if not more, will inspire you to step back and say, you know what? That's one thing I haven't been focusing on. That's one area I haven't yet amplified enough yet. And that's gonna give you the courage, the recipe for success to implement, to get out of that funk quicker. Now, you're still gonna have these. It's gonna happen as part of the journey, but this is going to get you out of that quicker by going back to these 10 pillars over and over again when you hit those walls and see what you can amplify in a positive way. I do to this day, and I wanna share these with you. Now, as you can see, I spelled out the word success because it's an acronym, but I have a couple extra C's, I have a couple extra E's, because I am the kind of guy that does like to go the extra mile. I'm a big fan of the extra mile. And as Wayne Dyer says, it's never crowded, on the extra mile. And that's where I want you to join me, is on this extra mile. Many of you are already there. But join me on this extra mile, because that is really where we're going to find our podcasting success, and through the implementation of these 10 success principles. So I'm going to ask you to focus. Many of you know this is my favorite acronym: follow one course until success. And I'm going to ask you to focus with me today as I go through this presentation, because I have a lot to share, and I want you to know that I have you covered. At eofire.com/gift, all these slides are going to be waiting for you of these 10 pillars of success, as well as my book, Podcast Launch. No opt-in required. It's my free gift to you. I'm giving you these two things because, again, I'm not going to be going into tactics and tips and tools. That's all covered in the book. It's being all covered beautifully by the speakers that are here today. The slides are going to be there as well. So again, if you can really just be intentional about your focus on this presentation, I know you're going to get a lot more out of it than trying to write a lot of things down. And you'll be able to go back and see the slides afterwards, and of course, have the recorded presentation if you so desire. So let's dive into success. For me, the first S has to go to start. And there's a quote that I love: if you want to be, do. What I love about this quote is its simplicity. I wanted to be a podcaster. I had to podcast. It was really that simple. There was no other way for me to become a podcaster. My resume consisted of Army, law school dropout, corporate finance, commercial real estate. I had no broadcasting experience, zero online presence whatsoever. I had to just start and be willing to be bad, and I was, for a significant amount of time, and that's okay. LeBron James did not make his first free throw. Tiger Woods did not make his first putt, or his last 10 either, but that's okay. But I'm telling you guys, you have to start. A year after I launched Entrepreneur on Fire, I wanted to start doing webinars. I had no idea how to do webinars. My first webinar, 3 people showed up, nobody said a word in the chat, and we did 0 sales. The second webinar, 10 people showed up, we did 1 sale, and they refunded 24 hours later. If I had stopped doing webinars then because I was bad and I was failing, I wouldn't have continued to do 60 more in 2014 alone and generate over $1.5 million on live webinars, period. That's because I started bad and kept going. A year after that, I'm like, this live event thing is kind of cool. I'm loving being in face-to-face contact with people, having real conversations, like being able to shake people's hand and give people high fives. I mean, that's awesome. I'd love to maybe get into the live event space. So when Jared and Dan approached me and said, hey, we're thinking about doing the first Podcasters Cruise, would you jump on board? And I said, well, if we can name it the Podcasters Paradise Cruise, then I'm on board, we can do this. And we started. Now, we don't know where that journey is going to end. We're setting sail on November 1st out of Fort Lauderdale. Still haven't sold out yet, so anybody that's on the edge of their seats, now's the time. But we are going forward. You know, we're having fun with this. We're going to see where it goes, and we might fail. But we're going to start to see where this journey goes. The idea for Podcast Movement started by these guys saying, hey, let's get a couple hundred people together in Dallas to talk about podcasting. Everybody's like, that will never work. I mean, they don't even get packed sessions at the biggest conferences when it's podcasting sessions. Well, 600 people showed up. They had to move the venue 3 times. 1,100 people are here this year. I mean, it's obviously worked because they started. So it all begins with starting. I've never liked the acronym USP, which is Unique Selling Proposition. It's something that I've used in the past because I didn't know of any better acronym than that for what I was trying to get across, but I've never loved the words selling, and I've never loved the words proposition. So I've switched things around within the last 3 months, and I'm really on a rampage about the UVD, which for me is the Unique Value Distinguisher. Now, this is critical as you're going on your podcasting journey because you want to be unique. You want to be bringing value to your audience with every single word that comes out of your mouth, as much as your ability will allow you to. And you want to distinguish yourself in this sea of podcasters. People that are packing into categories and top 10 and new and noteworthy, all these things are happening. People are launching podcasts every single day, and that's exciting because I can tell you what, there are 100 times more people listening to podcasts for the first time every day than there are producing podcasts. So this is a great world that we live in. This is a great time to be a podcaster, but you have to follow these 3 things. You have to be unique. How was I unique when I started? 7 days a week interviewing entrepreneurs. Nobody else was doing that. How did I add value? I wasn't able to add value when I started podcasting. I just didn't have value to add. I was a clueless, naive entrepreneur who had never done anything in the entrepreneurship world before. I had no broadcasting skills, but I said, I can bring people on that can add value. And so my first 50 guests were amazing entrepreneurs who had value to add. So from day one, my podcast had value, not from me, but from my guests. And that was very powerful. And then the third thing was the distinguishing factor. What was going to distinguish Entrepreneur on Fire from other podcasts that were already out there? Well, for me, my time right before I launched, when I was still doing the day job, was very valuable, my free time, because I was commuting to work, I was commuting home, and then I had a little bit of gym time too. But besides that, I didn't have a lot of free time for Automobile University, and I had to use that time incredibly well. So when I pressed play on some podcasts that I loved, and they spent the first 30 minutes talking about their cat or the weekends, which happened occasionally, not all the time, but when it happened, I felt like I had just wasted my one opportunity that day to move closer to my goal, which was to become a financially and location independent entrepreneur. And it hurt. So I committed to distinguishing myself by saying, you know what? I am going to have a formatted show. Yes, I'm going to ask the same questions every single day. Yes, it's going to be a completely unique show every single day because my guests are going to be asked what their worst moment is. And every guest is going to have a completely unique worst moment, aha moments, lightning round questions. So that was going to be the unique part. So I was guaranteeing my listener from day one that when they press play on Entrepreneur on Fire, they knew that they were going to get 25-ish minutes of just that format, that value. This next topic is very, very important to me, and I hope by the end of this it'll be important to you as well, and that's courage. So every single person in this room right now has an immense amount of courage. You have had to invest in yourself financially, your time, your bandwidth, amongst many other things, to be here right now. And that takes courage. There are tens of thousands of people that wanted to do what you're doing right now, to be in this room, but they're not for any number of reasons, including that they lacked the courage to do so. So what I want you to realize is that every single one of you in this audience right now has what I call a courage story. And I want you to think about that because throughout the rest of today and in further connections that you're making with the podcast movement attendees throughout, think about your courage story and offer your courage story to somebody else. Share your courage story with them because I'm telling you, when you share your courage story, that well that you go to, when you need that little dose of inspiration, when you need that extra oomph, when you just don't feel like doing that thing that you know you have to do, when you go back to that, that's your courage story. And I'll give you an example of mine. 2002, I graduated college. I was the first commissioned officers post 9/11 to be entered into the Army. So we knew as officers that we were going to war. It was real deal Holyfield. 9/11 had just happened. We knew it was going down. And sure enough, a year later, me, a 23-year-old, who just 12 months earlier was focused on keg stands and dances, was deploying to Iraq with 4 tanks and with 16 men under my commands, lives that I was responsible for, lives that I looked at their significant others when we were deploying and I said, I am the platoon leader. I will bring your loved one home. I said those words. Within the first 3 months of being deployed, I broke that promise. And one of my soldiers had given the ultimate sacrifice while on a night mission in Fallujah, Iraq. And so I stood at his coffin a couple days later, and I thought about that pledge that I had broken and how horrible it felt and how I was going to carry that weight on my shoulders for the rest of my life. And I really dug deep and I said, I am pledging right now on this soldier's ultimate sacrifice that I will never live a life less than I am capable of leading. I am not going to let other people's influences, I'm not going to let fear hold me down. Fear is going to come, but I'm not going to let it hold me down. Now, I had to make that pledge 3 more times during my 13-month deployment. And it was just as hard, if not more difficult, each and every time. And I've carried that with me to this day. But I will say that when I entered law school, which was the dream of my parents, my father has had his own practice for 30 years. And he had a place for me to just come right into and start practicing law in my home state of Maine. Everything was perfect. But I knew after 1 semester, I was not meant to be a lawyer. And I had to go to my courage story to break out of that. And I was able to. And I was able to quit, to look my father in the eye and say, Dad, I'm out. I'm not going to law school anymore. I'm quitting. And this is the first time at 27 years old that I'd ever been a big failure in my parents' eyes. And it was so hard, and it took a lot of courage. But I was able to go back to that courage story. And I was able to go back to that story again when I was stuck in corporate finance, and I knew I had to get out. And the same thing with commercial real estate, and I knew I had to leave, despite the fact that I was partnered with my brother-in-law, and he had put a lot of faith in me. But I had to go back to that courage story, and I knew that I had a path to follow. And you all have a courage story. So always identify that and be willing to talk about it and share it, because you will connect with people on a different level when you do. The next C is going to be called community. And that's what I love about the fact that we're here at Podcast Movement right now, because we are a community. Podcast Movement is a community. The Flynn Addicts, they are a community. Podcast Answer Man's crew, they're a community. Fire Nation, Podcasters Paradise, these are communities that have been created from this wonderful medium of podcasting. And you need to find your community, whoever that is, or make your own. It's amazing as well, because community will see you through the tough times. Now, speaking of community, somebody in my community, just a couple weeks ago, sent me an email and said, John, I am so looking forward to going to Podcast Movements. It would be an absolute honor if you would let me record you, your talk, Podcast Movement in general, Paradise, whatever it might be, and just to do it for you, because I love what you're putting out, and this is my way of saying thank you. And that's what happens when you form a powerful community. And I want to share with you that sizzle reel right now that's in just 24 hours. Matthew and Alyssa Pete were able to put together from no pixel too small. So let's cue the video here and let's take a look. This is you, Podcast Movement. The family that we've created here is absolutely amazing, and getting to come here to a conference like this is just phenomenal, and being able to support and guide each other throughout this coming weekend is really what it's all about. That's you, Podcast Movement. That's the community. Let's move into commitment. Commitment speaks for itself, but the reality is this. The road that you are embarking upon right now, it's going to take commitment. Know that from the beginning. Know that you are on a marathon of a journey. You are not on a sprint. This doesn't happen overnight. EntrepreneurOnFire, we're able to post amazing income reports every single month, but we were also able to post $0 made for the first 9 months of our existence, because we had the long term, the marathon. We knew it was going to be a period of time before anything was a viable business about Entrepreneur on Fire. So have that commitment up front. Go into it playing the long game. This one's important to me because I think a lot of people underestimate this. Care. We have to care. Now, I know, again, that sounds kind of obvious, but one thing I want you to think about is within the caring is your voice. Before we're even born, before we enter this world, we start connecting with voice. Before anything else. That connection never, ever leaves us. We can tell the mood of a person just by hearing their voice, their inflections, how they're talking. Your listeners who listen to you consistently, believe me, they know if you've gone up on the wrong side of the bed that day. They know if you're not really into this interview. Believe me, I've gotten emails about it before. I know it. It's true. So you have to go into each and every interview, each and every recording topic, whatever podcast you're doing, whenever you hit that red record button, say to yourself, I care. I care about my guest. I care about the topic I'm going to talk about. I care about my listener right now. Because if you put yourself in that right mindset when you start, it's going to make all the difference in the world. Think about the voice. That's the amazing thing about podcasting. That's why it's such an incredible medium. That's why it's going to fit that niche that I don't see going away anytime soon, because as my great friend Cliff Ravenscraft loves to say, you don't have to say no to something else to say yes to podcasting. Podcasting is always going to be there for you when you're driving your car, when you're running along the beach, when you're folding laundry, doing dishes. It will always be there for you. I have people that come up to me all the time and they say, John, I listen to you all the time. And they seem to love to say, I even listen to you in the shower. And I look at them and I say, you know I'm picturing you naked right now. Engage. Engaging is so incredibly important, and it starts on day one. It's even more important on day one than it is on day 100. Because if you want to build those raving fans, if you want to build that tribe that loves you, if you want to build a community, you have to engage with that community as early and often as possible. When they send you a tweet, respond back. When they send you an email, reply back. Anybody in this room who has received an email from me, it's been from me. Like, that is me responding to your email. If you sent me an email and I've replied, it has been me replying to you. I use a great tool called Vocaroo, which I love. And it allows me to hit the record button and actually just record a quick voice memo and attach it to the email so that my listeners, people that are reaching out to me, know that it is me taking the time to actually respond and not just putting this off for a virtual assistant. But no, this is me thanking them one-on-one, genuinely. Every single person that joins Podcasters Paradise gets a personalized video from me saying, Sarah, thank you for joining Podcasters Paradise. You putting your trust in us means the world. And every single person gets that personalized video from me. They get a personalized 1 to 2 minute phone call from me. Every single person that joins Paradise. We have over 2,500 members to date. And those are things that I do. Do they scale? No, those things don't scale. But as Brad Felds of Y Combinator, Mr. Silicon Valley, Mr. Leverage and Scale himself, is famous for saying, do things that don't scale. And that's what I'm telling you right now. Do things that don't scale and engage. Excitement. This really goes with voice, but even more so. Get excited about podcasting in general, the community that we've created here. Look at the products, the services that have come from podcasting. It's absolutely amazing. We are an industry. I mean, podcasting probably has the GDP of some third world countries. I mean, we have a lot of amazing things going on right now. There's a lot of great things that we have, and be excited about that. I mean, think about Spotify being like, we gotta get into podcasting. What's going on here? This is going to be massive. We have podcast websites, your all-in-one podcasting solution. We have the podcast cruise coming up. I mean, guys, last pitch for that. We have Simple Podcast Press. Handy's in the house. It's a great podcast player. You know, the great Pat Flynn has come up with Smart Podcast Player. We have some of the best minds in the entrepreneurial space are coming up with amazing tools, products, and services for podcasters, and it's just beginning. Look at all the boosts that are out there. Absolutely amazing things that are going on, my friends, and that is what we need to get excited about. Kate Lynn Erickson gave an amazing presentation. Can I see a show of hands of who was in Kate's presentation yesterday? Wow. Wow, that's a lot of people. So she gave an amazing presentation on systems. So if you weren't able to catch that, that's the beauty of the recording and of the video here. You better go back and watch that afterwards at your leisure. And I highly recommend it because I'm telling you, the key to Entrepreneur on Fire success and continued success with just Kate and myself and 3 full-time virtual assistants and 1 part-time virtual assistant is that we have systems. And systems equal consistency, and consistency equals success. So let's go backwards from that. You want to be successful? You have to be consistent. But if you want to be consistent, you have to have systems. The last thing I want to talk about is story. Story has always been a really big part of Entrepreneur on Fire. From me really making sure and holding my guests' feet to the fire about telling their worst entrepreneurial moments, not just brushing over some aerial view of it, but getting down into their worst entrepreneurial moment. Making my guests share the moment that light bulb actually went on in their head for whatever it is that they're successful for right now, and making them tell that story. So in the last 10 minutes that I have here, I want to tell you a couple quick stories. I've been wanting to take a sip of water for like 2 minutes here, but I just feel like Chris Ducker is going to start talking if I do. So let's just cross our fingers here. All right, cool. So let's talk about stories. And I have 3 quick ones to share with you. About a year and a half ago, I was contacted by a great couple. They said, John, can we interview you? I said, sure, audio, video, let's do this. Video, okay, jumped on the video, had the interview with them. Great people, it was fun. Just like the hundreds of other interviews that I do. Really enjoyed it, had a blast. And I remember getting off and I would have gone on to the next interview, but they did say one thing. They said, hey, John, by the way, we're gonna be moving out to San Diego in a couple months. Hope to connect. I said, hey, that sounds great when you get out here. Drop me a line. Love to see you. And that kind of made me think a little bit about them and kind of maybe look into them a little more to see if I was going to respond when they got out here to San Diego. And, I saw that they were just a great couple living in New York City. And I kind of did a little more, dug a little deeper. And I saw that, they were doing a show. The show was called People Who Know Their Stuff. Except it wasn't stuff. I'm sure you can imagine. And it's a great idea, but there was nothing distinguishing about the show. The male host had a lot of energy, but it was kind of misplaced energy. The female was great. She was a great girl. But you could tell she wasn't 100% stoked to be part of the video recording either. But they were good. They were getting there. I mean, it was part of the process, and I got that. But when I heard the story 6 months later, when they did move out to San Diego and we were having dinner at my place, they had used that drive to say, what's not working? Why is people who know their stuff not working? Nobody's listening, nobody's really connecting. And they said, because we're not different. We're not unique. We're not providing any distinguishing value whatsoever. So they said, well, what are we good at? And they looked at themselves and they said, we have 2 decades of teaching experience. Okay? How can we use that? Well, how about we just scrap people who know their stuff? It's not working. And let's go forward in something that we're actually strong in. I'm a teacher. How about I teach? How about I come up with lesson plans that are unique to the industry that nobody's doing to this high of a quality? And how about, because the girl wasn't so stoked about being behind the mic or the video, but she loved the editing, the engineering portion of it. She can focus on that. 2014 Podcast of the Year on iTunes, Omar and Nicole Zenholm of $100 MBA. They don't have a podcast that's 7 days a week that's giving 10-minute business tips, every now and then bringing on a fellow teacher to teach a topic. Very focused, very niche, very different, high production quality, and they've been able to make a difference. So don't get into the fallacy of sunk costs. Just because you've been doing something and put so much time, energy, effort, and money, if you finally feel that it's just really not right, stop it and go forward in another direction, because all you have is time. So don't continue to waste that time. As Seth Godin would say in his book, The Dip, the only way to get out of that hole is to stop digging. Omar and Nicole could have kept digging their whole lives, and they never would have gotten anywhere. But they stopped, they found another hole, and they dug and they struck gold. And here they are today. Another quick story. Guy emailed me a couple weeks after I launched my podcast, and he said, John, I am just in love with what you're doing with your podcast. I recorded something really quick. Can you listen to it? Because I'm thinking about launching my own podcast, interviewing entrepreneurs. And I listened to it and I said, oh boy, I'm in trouble. Like, this guy is so good, so natural, and I suck. Compared to the two, like, it's not even close. If this guy decides to do this, like, it's over, you know. But again, that was back when I had a scarcity mindset, and even if that was the case, abundance, my friends, there's enough room for all of us. But that was my mindset at the time. But I came back and I said, listen, man, you have a gift. You need the podcast. And he launched that podcast. But wife, kids, job, he had to pay the bills. He wasn't in the same situation that I was with 100% focus. And the show kind of lagged. Even though it was great, it got a little bit of traction, he just didn't get the success that he wanted. So then he scrapped it. And he tried something else. And he said, okay, this is going to be the new show with a new focus, with a new mission. And every time he did an interview, it was great and the energy was there, but he was just missing some key ingredients. The consistency wasn't all there. You know, he wasn't able to put 100% of his marketing brain behind it. I mean, he was all heart, passion, and voice, but, you know, he didn't maybe have the business mind that he needed to run that business at the same time. I respected this guy so much that for a while we did a co-podcast together called Love Your Leap, where we just got on the mic and just rapped about topics, just two dudes just chatting about podcasting and about entrepreneurship and about business and failure. And we had a blast doing it, a ton of fun across the board. But then during Love Your Leap, as it was growing, I get a phone call from Clay of Lead Pages, and he said, John, we got to get into this podcasting thing. We need to hire a podcasting professional to do our podcast, the Conversion Cast Lead Pages podcast. Do you have any idea who could do this? I said, there's one person who can do it. He's a guy who's been doing it for years. He's persisted. He's looking for that kind of structure. He would thrive in your environments. And to this day, Clay Collins still calls me up and says, John, Tim Page is the best hire that I've ever had. Thank you for doing that. And the last story that I'm going to make really brief, just because I'm down to a couple minutes, is a guy launched a podcast about a year ago. And the podcast was about monetizing your podcasts. Now, he just released an episode at the year mark that said, I'm shutting this podcast down. That was the title. And I was like, wow, I got to listen to this. Like, what's going on here? I've always enjoyed the podcast. The host is amazing, energy, content. He loves what he's doing. But he just couldn't figure out the viable part of podcasting. So I listened to it, and, you know, he decided he was thinking about closing it down, but he actually wasn't going to. But he was going to be trying a few new ideas coming up. And actually, one of those ideas was reaching out to me and saying, John, I want to produce a Podcaster's Paradise podcast where I will do all the work. I will interview the Podcast Paradise members, talk about their stories, their failures. We'll do a Q&A session on Thursdays where they can pipe in live questions, and we'll put it out to the world. It'll be a great kind of marketing vehicle for Paradise to other people who aren't in. It'll be great for Paradisers to showcase their stories. I said, I love the idea. You know, we hammered out the numbers, locked it in, and for the next year, Brian Kane of the Profit Cast is now going to be working with EntrepreneurOnFire for the Podcaster's Paradise podcast. He is one step closer to making a full-time living off of podcasting because he persisted, he persevered, and he kept trying new things. So guys, give it up for Brian Kane. I want to end with a couple things, but the main thing is something that I actually learned at conferences. Every time I go to a conference, I learn something incredibly valuable, oftentimes many things, and I hope you guys are as well. But Ray Higdon was on stage, and he was talking about ILT. And it made sense to me, but I never got it the way that I get it now until he put it this way. So I really want to make sure that I share this with you in hopes that you now get it the same way that I do and the same way that he shared. Invest. Invest in yourself. Doesn't always have to be money. Your time, your energy, your effort, your bandwidth. Invest it. Learn. Take the actual time once you've invested in these things, in conferences, in courses, whatever it might be. Take the time to learn the content. Take pride in learning that content that you have before you. 85 to 90% of people do these first two things all the time. But it's that last 10% that do this last thing that are finding success in the podcasting world, in the entrepreneurship world, period. And that's teach. Every single person in this room who has sat through this presentation knows more about the 10 podcasting success principles than 99.99% of the world. Now I'm saying turn around and teach that to others. I'm not copywriting this. I'm not going to chase you around. This is your information. You have invested in yourself. You are now learning this content. Now teach it. Things that you are learning this weekend, teach those things. You are an expert. Now, I didn't learn a lot of things in law school. I was there for one semester. But one thing that I did learn is that an expert witness in a court of law is somebody who knows more than other people in the courtroom. That is how a judge defines an expert witness. So if a judge in a court of law is defining an expert witness as somebody that just knows more than other people in the room, if you know more than other people in your room, in your community, you are an expert, so start acting like one. Teach free. This is a big breakthrough for me on a lot of levels, because in the beginning of 2015, I had to ask myself, what's working with EntrepreneurOnFire? Okay, well, what's not working? Like, what's not being amplified to the degree that it could be being amplified? And what was not being amplified enough was our message, our mission. So I said, I need to go back to the basics. And I encourage everybody here to be better at the basics. The basics for EntrepreneurOnFire was to deliver free, valuable, and consistent content, period. I wanted to get back to that. So now we have free podcast course and the webinar course, both completely free courses, soup to nuts, A to Z. If you want to learn how to podcast, that's for you. Create, grow, monetize. If you want to learn how to do webinars, create and present webinars that convert in 10 days, completely free. And people are saying, John, you are going to sabotage Podcaster's Paradise and EntrepreneurOnFire. The exact opposite happens. We now have over 18,000 people who have signed up on the email list to go through free podcast course, 9,000 people through free webinar course. That has turned into an amazing marketing platform for us now, because if I wasn't going to teach them for free, somebody else was. And then that know, like, and trust that I now have was going to be somebody else's, because it's not the time for everybody to jump in to a $1,297 program like Paradise or $647 like the EntrepreneurOnFire. But it might be some time, and when that time is right, if I've delivered them the value to get that know, like, and trust, where do you think they're going to go? They're going to come here, and they do. And a great example is when we closed Podcaster's Paradise doors for the entire month of May in 2015. We went off to the Philippines and Hong Kong and did some big upgrades within staff and within the community. We did a 4-day before closing, and we did 264 sales, over $300,000 for Podcaster's Paradise in those 4 days. 80% of those sales came directly from the free podcast course list. So if you're telling me that creating free content to deliver to your audience and your expertise is not of value, I'm here to tell you, you're wrong. So let's rip through this real quick. Start. If you want to be, do. UVD, unique value distinguisher. Courage. What's your courage story? Share it. Community. Find your community, thrive in it. Commitments. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Be committed. Care. It comes out every time you open your mouth. Engage. This is your community. Be engaged with them. Excitement. Be excited about what podcasting is doing to this world. It's amazing, and it's only going to get more amazing. Systems. Systems equal consistency. Consistency equals success. Story. Always go back to the stories. There's a reason why history is broken up into his story. We grew up with stories. We love stories. That's how history was passed down throughout the generations. We perk up when we hear people about to tell a story. That will never change. So I want to end with my favorite quote by Albert Einstein. Try not to become a person of success, but rather become a person of value. Albert Einstein. Because when I started post-military at 26 years old, I spent 6 years trying to become a person of success, and I failed each and every attempt. But at 32, when I finally said, you know what, I'm going to listen to Albert Einstein. Watch this. Pretty cool, right? I searched a long time for that one. When I listened to Albert Einstein, finally, and I became that person of value first and foremost, that's when success came, because success follows value. So take it in your hearts, make a commitment to become that person of value with your podcast, with your entrepreneurship journey. And I thank every one of you today for listening to the 10 Pillars of Podcasting Success.
In 2016, podcast movement is hitting the road as we make our way to the Windy City. Spend some of your summer with us at the beautiful Hyatt Regency in Chicago, Illinois. Join us July 6th through the 8th as podcast movement does it bigger and better than ever. Tickets go on sale this December. We'll once again have amazing featured speakers and over 1,000 of your best podcaster friends. All that's missing is you. Register today, and we'll see you in Chicago.